Thomas would not have got suspended if it was not for Adam Silver.
Alyssa Thomas would not have gotten suspended if it was not for Adam Silver. Let that sentence breathe for a second, because that is not a rumor. That is not a hot take from a guy on the internet. That is what multiple sources told the Sports Business Journal. The NBA commissioner had to personally step in and force the WNBA commissioner to discipline a player who drove a fist into Caitlin Clark's throat. This is the story of a league commissioner so paralyzed by fear of her own players that she was willing to let a violent act against the most valuable asset in the history of her league go completely unpunished, until the man running the bigger, richer, more powerful league above her picked up the phone and said, "You have to act." And by the time you reach the 12-minute mark of this video, you are going to understand exactly who benefits from Cathy Engelbert's cowardice, who is paying the price for it, and why the Sports Business Journal's own sources are now openly saying she is likely in her final season as commissioner. Stay with me. Every single person watching this needs to hear this story from beginning to end.
Silver needed to persuade Engelbert is another sign she is likely in her final season as commissioner.
Let's establish the baseline, because context is everything here. Caitlin Clark is not just a good player, she is not just a fan favorite. Caitlin Clark is the single most transformative economic event this league has ever experienced. In 2024 and into the beginning of 2025, fans were paying above face value, way above face value, just to get into a fever game. Merchandise sales moved, gate prices moved, ratings moved. None of those things had moved for this league in any meaningful, sustained, needle-shifting way before Caitlin Clark arrived. And that is not hyperbole. That is not me hyping this up. That is simply the math. So when we talk about what happened with Alyssa Thomas, when we talk about a player driving her fist into the throat of the one draw this league has ever produced, we are not talking about a garden variety flagrant foul. We are talking about a physical assault on the golden goose. We are talking about someone taking a swing at the economic engine that is the only reason new television deals are being discussed, the only reason new franchises are being valued at record levels, the only reason anyone outside of a hardcore women's basketball bubble is paying attention to this league at all. That is the payoff stat I want you to hold in your mind for the entirety of this video: 0. 0 times has Cathy Engelbert attended a fever game in Indianapolis since Caitlin Clark arrived. 3 seasons, 0 appearances. We will come back to that number because it tells you everything you need to know about how this commissioner views the asset she has been handed. Now, before we go any further, if you are finding this breakdown valuable, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover this story every single day, and you do not want to miss what is coming next.
And they pointed to the fact she has not attended a fever game in Indianapolis since Clark arrived 3 seasons ago.
Here is what actually happened. According to the Sports Business Journal, sourced from multiple people with direct knowledge of the situation, Alyssa Thomas drove a fist into Caitlin Clark's throat. No foul was called on the floor in real time. And Cathy Engelbert, the commissioner of the Women's National Basketball Association, looked at the video evidence, looked at the moment, and decided that because the referees did not call it live, a suspension would be, in her estimation, too steep a discipline. I want you to sit with that. A player put her fist into the throat of the league's most important player. There is video, there is clear evidence, and the commissioner's initial instinct was, probably nothing. What's fascinating, and by fascinating I mean absolutely staggering, is that this is the same commissioner who is supposed to be setting the cultural tone for this league. This is the person who is supposed to be the final authority on player safety, on the protection of the product, on the message the league sends to its fans, its sponsors, and its broadcast partners about what kind of organization this is, and her instinct was to do nothing. It is like being the manager of a 5-star restaurant, watching a cook walk out of the kitchen and slap the one chef who is the entire reason the restaurant has a 3-year waiting list, and then shrugging and saying, "Well, the health inspector was not in the building when it happened, so technically I am not sure we can act." That is the level of institutional paralysis we are dealing with. Now, Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, the man who runs the league that is essentially the parent organization of the WNBA, reportedly stepped in and implored Engelbert to reverse course and issue discipline. Multiple sources, Sports Business Journal, this is not a rumor. This is reported fact. And what did the WNBA do? They issued a 1-game suspension and a $1,000 fine. $1,000, let me say that again so it lands properly. $1,000. That is the financial penalty the WNBA attached to driving a fist into the throat of Caitlin Clark. That is less than most people spend on a weekend trip. That is less than the cost of a courtside ticket at a fever game during peak Clark demand. That is the message Cathy Engelbert sent, even after Adam Silver forced her hand, about how much she values protecting this asset. Do not take my word for it on how damning this looks. Listen to what people close to this story are actually saying.
Y'all can bully Cathy. You're not going to bully Adam.
Sources believe the fact that Silver needed to persuade Engelbert is another sign she is likely in her final season as commissioner. Another sign, meaning this is not an isolated incident in the eyes of the people who are watching this league from the inside. This is a pattern. This is a body of evidence that has been accumulating, and the Alyssa Thomas situation is simply the latest and most damaging entry in that file. Let me walk you through the pattern, because this is where it gets genuinely infuriating. This is not the first time Adam Silver has had to publicly signal that the WNBA's handling of Caitlin Clark is a problem. When Clark was left off the 2024 Olympic team, Silver did not stay quiet. He went on record and called it a massive miss for women's basketball. The planet's biggest female basketball player, his words, essentially, was not on the Olympic roster, and the NBA commissioner felt compelled to say publicly that the WNBA had fumbled it. He did not have to do that. He chose to do that because the business case for Clark is so obvious, so overwhelming, that staying silent would have been its own kind of statement. And what did Cathy Engelbert do in response to that? What did she do to demonstrate that she understood the gravity of what had happened, that she was going to course correct, that she was going to be a visible, vocal, forceful advocate for the player who was single-handedly transforming her league's economic profile? She dodged the Dan Patrick Show. While she was at the very golf tournament where Dan Patrick's show was being broadcast, she committed to the appearance, she was physically present at the same venue, and she decided not to show up. That is the level of accountability we are dealing with. That is the commissioner's relationship with public transparency. Now here is where it gets rich, and by rich I mean almost comedically self-defeating. Sources close to Engelbert have said she is in an unenviable position, trying not to show favoritism toward the overly popular Clark, while also trying to appease players who feel overshadowed by Clark. I want every single person watching this to really hear that framing. The argument being made on Engelbert's behalf is that she has been bending over backwards not to favor Caitlin Clark, that she has been so determined not to appear biased toward the money that she has gone in the opposite direction entirely. And the result? Critics league-wide told the Sports Business Journal that Engelbert has gone overboard in not prioritizing the Fever star. The critics are not Clark fans on Twitter, these are people inside the league. And they pointed to the fact that Cathy Engelbert has not attended a single Fever game in Indianapolis since Caitlin Clark arrived. 3 seasons, 0 appearances, from the commissioner of the league. At the home arena of the player who is the reason the league is having any kind of cultural moment at all. I want you to let that sink in. That is not a scheduling conflict. That is a choice. That is a sustained, deliberate, multi-year choice.
This would not have got suspended if it was not for Adam Silver.
She has not attended a Fever game in Indianapolis since Clark arrived 3 seasons ago. 3 seasons, 0 visits, and she wants you to believe she is just trying to be fair. This is where the borrowed authority argument becomes impossible to ignore because the Sports Business Journal's reporting on Adam Silver's posture toward Clark mirrors exactly what we have seen from every commissioner in every sport who has ever had a once-in-a-generation asset land in their lap. You protect the asset, you build around the asset, you make the asset feel valued because the asset is the reason the casual fan is in the building, the reason the television contract gets renewed at a premium, the reason the merchandise sells, the reason the ticket prices go above face value. What you do not do, what no competent league executive in the history of professional sports has ever done successfully, is try to manage your way around the asset's popularity by pretending the asset is not that important. You do not avoid the arena where the asset plays. You do not wave off a physical assault on the asset because the referee did not catch it in real time. You do not need a phone call from the commissioner of the parent league to force you to issue discipline. Think about what the NBA looked like when it had a player of this magnitude. Think about the institutional energy that went into protecting and promoting that player's brand, that player's games, that player's image. The league did not try to manage down the star's popularity to make the other players feel better. The league leaned in. The league understood that a rising tide lifts all boats and that suppressing the tide to protect the boats that were already low in the water is not a management strategy, it is institutional suicide. That is the lesson Cathy Engelbert has failed to learn, and it is the lesson Adam Silver has apparently been trying to teach her.
Silver needed to persuade Engelbert is another sign she is likely in her final season as commissioner.
You can bully Cathy, you are not going to bully Adam, and that is the entire power dynamic of this situation summarized in 2 sentences, because here is the business reality that nobody in the WNBA player faction that has been making Engelbert's life difficult seems to want to acknowledge. Adam Silver manages players who are making $55 million a year. $55 million. The top earners in the WNBA, under the new collective bargaining agreement, are making somewhere in the range of $800,000 to $1.2 million annually. Those are not comparable leverage positions. The intimidation tactics that may have worked on a commissioner who was already predisposed to appease, who was, according to multiple reports, emotionally and institutionally afraid of her own players, do not translate to a conversation with the man who runs the NBA. When Adam Silver tells you that you have to act, you act. And notably, Alyssa Thomas did not quarrel with the suspension, she did not go to the media, she did not push back publicly, because you do not push back against the NBA commissioner. There is no leverage there. There is no union grievance powerful enough to move that needle. It is, as the source put it, a sit down and shut up moment. And here is what that tells us about everything that has been happening in this league. The players who have been most vocal about their resentment of Caitlin Clark's prominence, the players who have been most aggressive in their treatment of her on the court, and most dismissive of her in the media, have been operating in an environment where the commissioner gave them no reason to believe there would be consequences. Kathy Engelbert's pattern of non-response, of minimal discipline, of institutional silence, created the conditions for the behavior to escalate. She did not draw the line, she did not send the message, and so the message that got sent instead was, there are no real consequences here. Adam Silver just sent a different message, and the fact that Alyssa Thomas went quiet the moment it came from him tells you everything about how seriously that message was received. Now let's talk about what this means for Kathy Engelbert's future, because the Sports Business Journal reporting is not subtle about this. League insiders had previously told SBJ that Engelbert would probably be forced from her job sometime following the spring's collective bargaining negotiations. The CBA got done, she appeared to earn a reprieve, the thinking being that you do not change commissioners mid-negotiation, but the thought process, according to sources, was always that once the deal was done, she would likely be out the door. Then Adam Silver was asked directly at the NBA Summer League news conference whether the WNBA Board of Governors had addressed Engelbert's future, and Silver praised the league's progress under her leadership. He lauded the CBA. He said, and I am quoting directly from the reporting, "I think Kathy continues to do a strong job building that league," and then he closed by saying, "We'll have ongoing discussions about what the future looks like." What's interesting, and by interesting I mean absolutely transparent to anyone who has ever sat through a corporate press conference, is that we'll have ongoing discussions about what the future looks like, is not a ringing endorsement. That is the language of a man who has already made a decision and is managing the public announcement timeline. That is the language of someone who knows what is coming and is being careful about when and how he says it. Silver did not say Engelbert is the right person to lead this league for the next 5 years. He praised the past and left the future deliberately, conspicuously open. She is done. The sources inside the league believe it. The reporting from SBJ signals it. And the fact that Silver had to personally intervene to get a one-game suspension issued for a fist to the throat of the league's biggest star is the exclamation point on the argument for why. And let us not forget that the political pressure has now entered the equation as well. Members of the U.S. House of Representatives sent a letter to Engelbert threatening federal scrutiny over what they described as the bullying of Caitlin Clark. When Congress is writing letters to a women's basketball commissioner about the treatment of a specific player, you have crossed a threshold. You are no longer managing a sports story, you are managing a political story, a business story, and a public relations catastrophe simultaneously. And Kathy Engelbert's response to all of it has been to dodge interviews, stay silent publicly, and wait for someone else to force her hand. That is not leadership, that is the absence of leadership wearing a commissioner's title. Let me bring this home, because I want to be completely clear about where we are and where this is going. The WNBA has had the greatest commercial gift in its history land in its lap in the form of Caitlin Clark. This is not a debatable point. The ticket premium, the merchandise movement, the television ratings, the cultural conversation, all of it is traceable to one player. The asset generated value that this league had never seen and may not see again if it is not protected and cultivated. And the commissioner's response to having this asset was to stay away from her home arena for 3 consecutive seasons, to nearly allow a violent act against her to go completely unpunished, and to require intervention from the NBA commissioner to do the bare minimum. And here is the payoff stat one final time, because I want it to be the last thing you remember from this video. 0 times. Kathy Engelbert has attended 0 fever games in Indianapolis since Caitlin Clark arrived, 3 seasons. The commissioner of the league has never shown up to watch its most important player play at home. That is not a scheduling conflict, that is a statement. And the statement it makes about how this league has been managed is damning. The predictions are straightforward. Kathy Engelbert does not survive this season as commissioner. The sources say it, the SBJ reporting implies it, Adam Silver's carefully worded non-endorsement confirms it. The only question is the timing and the manner of the exit. The WNBA will get a new commissioner, and whoever that person is, will inherit a league that is still, despite everything, sitting on one of the most valuable individual player assets in the history of women's sports. The question is whether the next commissioner will actually show up to watch her play.
And they pointed to the fact She has not attended a Fever game in Indianapolis since Clark arrived 3 seasons ago.
Here is what I need from you right now in the comments section. I want a straight answer, no hedging. Is Kathy Engelbert deliberately failing Caitlin Clark, or is she just incompetent? Those are your two options, deliberately failing her, or simply incompetent. Drop it below. I read every single comment on this channel, and I want to know where this audience stands. If you are new here, and this breakdown was valuable to you, subscribe right now, and turn on all notifications so you do not miss the next video. This story is moving fast, and we are covering every development as it happens. And click the video on your screen right now, because we have another breakdown up that connects directly to what you just watched, and you are going to want to see it. This is WNBA News. We'll see you in the next one.
There, y'all can bully Kathy. You're not going to bully Adam.